All right, thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to briefly introduce ourselves and then run through a couple of the real basic things about the course, but mostly leave time for your questions. So I'll start. I'm Professor Keys. I teach at University of Baltimore. I teach a mix of things, but right now, for the first years, ILS and CivPro, and then professional responsibility and immigration law. Before that, I joined immigration clinic for 10 years, and I taught in the Aberdeen program in 2019. So tonight I will be your Aberdeen tour guide, but you will also be taught in Aberdeen by Professor Tu.
Great. So hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Professor Kevin Tu. I teach at the University of Maryland, Francis King Carey School of Law, and I teach first-year contracts and a whole host of upper-level business and commercial law courses like business associations, securities law, and the UCC courses. I've not taught previously in the Aberdeen program, but I'm excited to do so and happy to answer questions and get you all more information about the courses that are being offered and the program itself this evening.
So the courses themselves, each is 3 credits, so you get 6 credits total over 4 weeks, which is amazing. And we'll just describe each of them really briefly. Kevin, do you want to go?
Sure. So this summer, I'll be teaching a comparative business law course. The way that you can think about this course is that it's really going to be used as a vehicle to expose you all to hot topic issues in corporate and commercial law with a global and comparative perspective. So you will not need any sort of business background prior to taking this course. It will be offered in a seminar type format where we will likely focus on a different kind of hot topic of corporate or commercial law each week. So for example, we're likely to cover topics like the regulation of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and also things like efforts to increase board diversity, for example, looking at statutes, trying to improve gender diversity on corporate boards of directors, and other similar topics. We'll likely look at things like ESG, and insider trading as well. So we will have this presented in a way where we can really kind of focus on each topic for about a week. I'll be in charge of presenting the kind of US perspective, and my colleague at the University of Aberdeen, Professor Alastair McPherson, will be presenting from the UK perspective, although he's likely to have guest professors also come in to teach where their expertise align. So it's really an exciting opportunity, I think, to focus on kind of hot topics in corporate and commercial law, especially ones that both the US and the UK are dealing with right now, and thinking about how the law and policy surrounding the law may develop differently and how the legal frameworks may develop differently given the different environments of the 2 places that we'll be looking at.
Great. And my course is going to be comparative human rights. And again, it's meant not for people who are already steeped in human rights. I know for folks who just finished 1L, you haven't gotten to take any electives. But it's going to start by giving a very sort of like a scaffolding for how human rights develop and how they're enforced generally, but then we turn very, very quickly that first week to sort of how they get exercised in the UK, Scotland in particular, and Europe and the US, different systems. And then within those systems, then we'll turn to the different sort of subjects of interest like healthcare, economic and social rights, climate change related human rights, and so on and so forth. There's a whole host of topics. We're still tweaking the last couple. It's going to be me and 2 Aberdeen professors, one of whom is, it's going to be a nice balance because one of them is sort of very interested in the theory of how rights develop over time and how new rights come to be. super important for something new like climate change. And the other comes out of its sort of deep practice experience in terms of national security and criminal legal system. And so there's sort of a blend of perspectives there. Our hope, I think both of us, with these courses, is that when you come back to the States, you'll have an enhanced capacity, whether you ever touch business or human rights law again, you'll have an enhanced capacity to think about the fact that different systems are going to approach things really differently and give you that sort of critical insight, or at least critical curiosity you can bring to anything you study. How do other systems handle this problem, that problem, this thing that I'm dealing with? And hopefully we'll give you the tools to do that, and have really interesting conversations along the way, because both of these are pretty fun topics, it turns out. That might be a law professor speak for what counts as fun, but whatever. The way it's set up there to get these 6 credits, you have 4 hours of class daily. It's usually 2 hours, a tea break, tea and biscuits, and another 2 hours. That's not going to be the case every day, and most of the Fridays are either an excursion or off. So there's a little bit of variety. The final schedule has not been given to us, so we can't post it. But that essentially gets you up to your hours, and then you'll have readings. Each of us is giving you a couple of reflection memos, nothing terribly heavy, but just to make sure you're sort of earning the 6 credits. And then there will be a final exam in each course at the end. In terms of those excursions, 2 of them are pictured here. Sorry, the castle is blurry. That's Dun Otter Castle. There's no real course tie-in to either of our courses, but it's a cool outing. And then the Peterhead Prison Museum is pictured in the bottom right, and that does tie in to some of the sort of criminal legal system, human rights. And then there's also a tour to Edinburgh to visit Parliament, and around Edinburgh typically as well. The dates of the program are up here. The course starts July 10th with orientation. There's nothing prior. So as long as you're sort of in Aberdeen by late on July 9th, you're just fine. And then it runs through Friday, August 4th. And before that, after that, what you do is sort of up to you. But between those dates, you'd be part of our program. And just one little thing, at least from the UB side, you have to have finished your first year courses, which is complicated for evening students, but essentially if it's in the first year curriculum, you have to have taken that before Aberdeen. You also have to have a GPA of 2.0 or better if you're at UB. And that, I think, is all I had to say. That's just the university. And the classroom we were in last time is sort of to the right of that archway from this picture. So just to give you a feeling for it. Last time we did a talk, there were a ton of questions. So we'd like to open it up to your questions. Unless, before I do that, Professor Tu, anything you want to add to that?
Nope, that sounds great.
Awesome. Questions?
I have a question. I have a couple questions actually.
Yeah, go for it.
So my first question is about, does the Scotland Aberdeen program satisfy the law and context requirement?
I don't think it does, but I'm just going to jot that down.
Okay, because I know comparative law was on that list.
That is a academic affairs question I haven't looked at, so I don't want to give you the wrong answer, but maybe you can hang out at the end and I can look it up.
Thank you. The other 2 questions I have is when should we expect the itinerary for what we're going to be doing there, and like the excursions and everything?
Hopefully really soon. We've been asking for it. It hasn't come yet. So I don't know.
Okay.
But
and the course
I think mid-April would be really reasonable. And it might even be before that.
Okay. The course load was my last question. How does that look? in terms of outside of class, how much reading is usually assigned and homework? Besides, I know you mentioned the memo.
Yeah, so 3 credit class typically is supposed to be, oh my gosh, my ABA hat is flying out, like 6 hours per credit outside of class. So it's going to be a lot of reading. Not all of that's reading, part of that's the memo. Yeah, we're able to fold the excursions into the time that you spend, in the program. So it's not maybe as sort of rigid as it is in the sort of full-time semester program, but there's still some numbers that we have to hit in terms of that. I will say, that's it. In 2019, which was also offered for 6 credits, students, most students took at least 1 weekend traveling somewhere in Europe in the middle of the program. People were coming in with reports of cool things they had done, from checking out gin and whiskey distilleries to playing golf. Fun was had. But there is an exam at the end and there is a grade. So
Thank you.
I just want to add a little dose of reality, but also it's not impossible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you so
I'll
much.
just kind of chime in a little bit from my perspective. For my course specifically, I'm not anticipating anything outside of class other than the assigned readings for classes and the weekly reflection papers. So, I mean, from the comparative business law class perspective, that's kind of what I'm anticipating as the outside work. Like, if you do your reading and you're prepared for class to have the discussions, then you'll be great. And then if you're kind of reflecting on your own in the reflection papers and kind of taking that seriously, then that's going to be what you should be thinking of for I guess what's required for my class. With that being said, I'll also say, my view of the summer program is, yes, you're going to be doing work because you've got 6 credits that you're going to be getting in total between the 2 classes. But I also understand that you all are going on the summer program in Aberdeen, not just to take a law school class, because there are other experiences that you're going to be able to get that are valuable outside of the class as well. And so I anticipate all of you having time to be able to do those things. And I wasn't part of the program previously, but in talking to those who have taught in it on the Maryland side, and also some students who have gone on the program, I mean, I think Professor Kies is right. A lot of fun was had. I mean, students were going places in the afternoons and evenings, on weekends, on long weekends. They weren't just staying in Aberdeen. Some students, were traveling quite far afield for long weekends. So I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity to have a lot of fun and explore Europe with Aberdeen as a home base as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess take that for what it is, and hopefully you'll have the schedule soon so that you can really kind of see what that looks like. But from what I've seen of past schedules, I mean, classes are typically start in the morning, so you should have time after classes, obviously, for reading and things like that, but also to do other things. And then, as Professor Kia said, oftentimes Friday is either an excursion or there might not be class on Friday, so you're going to have a long weekend perhaps built in on several weeks, because you finish class midday on Thursday, for example, and then you've got Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So there should be plenty of time to do fun things too.
We're really in an awkward position as the professors here, with things that we need to encourage you to understand about your responsibilities for a rigorous academic program. And we understand you're in Scotland and we understand things. I will say I had one duo. I guess it was the weekend there wasn't even a Friday excursion. or maybe there was, but it was the Edinburgh one, so they were already sort of at a place they could hop on a plane really easily. They pulled into class 15 minutes late the Monday morning because they were just getting back from their weekend in Paris. So, and they did just fine. Amanda.
Hi, professors. I have a few questions as well. I was wondering if the readings would be in books that we would have to get before going, or if they would be provided for us.
Great question. For the comparative business law class, I think you all will like this. I'm not anticipating having a textbook at all for the summer. I will assign readings that will be excerpts from law review articles and other sources that I'll be able to kind of post the excerpts and things like that on. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the University of Aberdeen uses Blackboard, so yeah. we'll kind of post electronically, at least for the business law class. So you won't have the expense of a book, because this is really a seminar-based course that's kind of focusing on current issues, and so I want to get us the most current and most relevant readings for the class. So
yeah, and same for me. It's going to be readings that'll be available on Blackboard.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, I know there's housing. Would that be available the 10th through the 4th? Okay.
It's so the campus provided housing. I know you can check in earlier, whether it's a day or two, I don't know, and then you can stay until the Saturday after. And I'm not sure how much after.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure. Hannah?
First of all, thank you for the for not forcing us to purchase textbooks for this and schlepping them all the way to Aberdeen. I guess my question, you touched on it a little bit at the other info session about Airbnb possibility. My fiance would like to join for like maybe a week, and I'm guessing based on the rigor, it'd probably be best if it were like the first half, or at least until we get the calendar out. But obviously there's not room for him in the single bed. So I was just wondering if there was anything else about that option.
So I was just looking at the course website, and the way the price is broken down, the housing is a separate fee. So I'm thinking that's going to be something that's very easy to divide if you don't want to be in the campus housing, but instead do an Airbnb. But the best person for that question would be Dean Gaslovic, I think. Just to make sure. Yeah. Before I was nervous that it was all put together with the actual tuition fee, but it is separated out, so I can't see why there would be a problem.
Thank you.
Sure. Other questions? If you have the question, other people have the question. Essence.
What was my question? Oh, Blackboard. You said the University of Aberdeen probably uses Blackboard. Does that mean we will have to get Blackboard, because we don't use Blackboard?
They'll give you like login credentials. It's web-based like Sakai or Twin, and so it's just a question of having the credentials. And once you're on, it's pretty easy to use, probably easier to use than Sakai.
Okay.
So look, if Professor Tu and I can use it to set up our course, you can use it to read stuff.
Okay. And Dean Gaslovic about the housing thing, because I'm also not planning to stay on the campus. I plan to get a hotel for the time that we're there. So do we have to let her know that, or do we can just do it?
I would let her know. If you're a UB student, let Dean Gaslovic know.
Okay. You said, can you spell her name? Sorry, I was writing.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll just jump in. They have updated Blackboard, and it's nowhere near as clunky as it was more than 10 years ago when I was an undergrad and used it. So it's definitely a lot better now.
That's great. That was my sense, but I haven't used it in a while.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, quick question. I'm actually an evening student at Maryland. My question is just kind of a general inquiry on if there have been people that work full-time in the past that have went on this and have been able to manage, doing their job remotely while attending the program and being able to manage the readings and the classes daily?
Really good question. The people I know who were working full-time took time off to do it. They figured taking the time and getting sick credits was a good trade-off, but they weren't working full-time during the program. But at Maryland, Dean Eisenberg probably has more experience of which Maryland students might have been in that position before. I only have the data point of one summer. So she might, do you think that's a good idea, Professor Tu, to check in with?
Yeah, I think that's fair, David, just because, I also don't have, a wealth of data on, how many students we've had in the past that have done what you're asking about. And I don't even really have anecdotal information on that because I've not taught in the program before. So it's probably it probably makes a lot of sense to touch base with Dean Eisenberg, and either you can do that or I can also reach out to her and we can try and find you more information to see if anybody's done it. With that being said, I'll just kind of mention a couple things generally. I think on the one hand, there's going to be a little bit more of a compressed time schedule as far as what you're going to need to do for class in order to get the number of credits within the 4 weeks. So there may be kind of, I guess you're going to have to account for that compressed amount of time and kind of the reading that you're going to have to do for class there. With that being said, if you probably know your job situation and your work situation better than anyone else. So, to the extent that you think that it's possible, to manage the time requirements, the time differences, how much flexibility you have between classes and work, then, I can't imagine that I wouldn't categorically say like it's not possible, right? Like, I mean, you can, you're an evening student, you're obviously have a lot of experience, managing your time as is. So I'm not going to say that it's not possible, but I think you're going to want to think about kind of how you're going to balance the obligations, on the work side with the school side, and we can certainly follow up and try and get more information about, whether we know of other students that have done it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I was just curious because based on Europe being 5 hours ahead of the East Coast, and the classes being in the morning for 4 hours, it seems logistically feasible. It's more just a question of the extracurricular activities or out of the classroom activities, would they conflict with my work schedule, which would be kind of more in like the later afternoon to evening if I were to even try to do this while working. So, but yeah, thanks. I can follow up after.
What might make sense too is to, as soon as the schedule is out with the excursions, with the daily classes, check and see what that feels like at this point. I would say some work for sure is possible. Like I was still doing my kind of clinic cases and stuff while doing the class prep and the excursions and everything, and did just fine. But 40 hours of work, I'd say, there's kind of no point to being in Scotland at that point, although I guess you could really enjoy Scottish coffee shops.
Yeah, understood. I mean, I would definitely take, some time off, but I couldn't take a full month off, but okay. Yeah, I'll follow back up and look at that schedule once it's out. Appreciate it.
Perfect. That sounds great. Anna.
First of all, David, we miss you. I'm also an evening student. Glad that you're thinking about coming to Scotland too. But I guess just as an anecdote, I'll probably be doing like one full work day spread out over is what we're coordinating with my work personally. So that way I'm only taking 4 vacation days a week and can like space it out better that way, is at least what we're working on planning. And also Eric Gino was thinking of coming too, David. So
that's great to hear. I'll have to just kind of see my schedule and see what works. But yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
One work day feels very doable to me, just from my own experience of trying to do too much while I was there, and I still had a great experience of Aberdeen. Other questions? Maybe I'll just add at that point, Aberdeen is not on the tourist circuit really in Scotland. And so I want to just sort of put some pretty pictures in the slideshow, but it's a city whose charms you sort of uncover. And the more you walk around and look around, the more there is. That there are, David, I joked about the coffee shops, but there's some like fabulous ones. There's gardens that are absolutely gorgeous. There's old buildings everywhere. The North Sea is there. You can just like watch dogs playing frisbee in the North Sea. Like it's not flashy touristy. It's lovely. And then the outings that are nearby are just magnificent. You're an hour from the Queen's Castle in, well, I guess the King's Castle in Balmoral. It's just beautiful. So if you can make it work, I think it's a really lovely place to study and get a little ahead on your credits.
Do you maybe want to mention what
Yep.
you know about the housing through the university? There may be some students who weren't at our last session at UB that may have some questions about what the housing is like.
Sure. So we don't know which dorm it will be, but it's basically dorm housing. And so what it was last time was 4 singles around sort of a kitchen and common area. So the students there were about 20 students last time, so they were in 5 different ones of those. Very basic was the message. When I went to an alum to sort of prepare to talk to you all, she said, tell them it's really basic. And we were there during a heat wave, so it was also really hot. That's not typical. What they ended up doing was kind of cool. They went to the store, chipped in, got a couple of kitchen things, a couple pots and cooking spoons and spices and whatnot, and then they would have sort of somebody responsible for cooking each night, like one sort of the sets of 4. And so they actually turned it into kind of a team bonding thing that seemed to work really well. But yeah, be under no illusions. It's not like luxurious housing, which I think accounts for the cost, which is pretty reasonable. As since you mentioned a hotel, like I've been looking at hotels. But so the dorm might end up having its attractions. Plus there's that's where we come meet you for the excursion and stuff like that. And it's quite close to the university. Anything else? I'm going to put my email address in the chat as well, just if anybody wants to reach out for sort of the more detailed questions. Dean Gasselbeck at UB, Dean Eisenberg at Aberdeen, but when it comes to our courses, our expectations, either of us, great. Thank you so much.
I'll put my email into the chat as well. I'm happy to chat with anybody that has follow-up questions or has questions that pop up after the session.
Hannah,
I actually do have one more question. So if I've already submitted my application, pay the deposit, registered for the classes, can I assume that I've been accepted, or do I still need to wait for like a formal go ahead?
You should probably wait for the formal go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I'll wait to book my flights.
Wait to book your flights, just in case. It's looking like our numbers are going to be fine, but if we don't hit the minimum number, which is I think 10, we won't have the program. Nobody's worried about that, but until we get to that point, I wouldn't book flights.
Okay,
so
cool.
We heard the official word, which should be
Thank
pretty
you.
soon.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course. Anything else? All right, thanks for being here tonight. You've got our emails if other questions come to you. Be well. Nice to see you, Professor too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.